You can have everything in line, your website, your logo, demand in the market, but if you don't communicate in a way that people want to buy from you, you're going to have a hard time making money. And maybe you've wondered why some people who seem like the exact person your product or service could benefit didn't buy. Could it be the way you communicate? When was the last time you looked at your verbal and nonverbal communication skills? Have you ever thought about the way that you communicate? My guest today is Tony Acosta, who has spent a lot of time learning how to communicate well. He frequently speaks on stage, runs a real estate team, has a podcast of his own, and runs the Utah County chapter for TEDx. Basically, he's constantly communicating in the business world. We're going over common mistakes people make when speaking with potential clients, how to correct those mistakes, and daily steps you can take to improve your communication skills. And guess what? It's free. Results speak for themselves, and your success in life and in business will greatly rely on your ability to connect with the marketplace. So if you want to improve your communication, we have all that coming up on this episode with Tony Acosta. This is Utah Hustlers, the podcast that helps you build your business to $10,000 a month. My name is Skylar Beitendorf, and my mission is to help you achieve success, happiness, and freedom on your own terms.
So my name's Tony Acosta. I do a number of things. The main gig is I'm a real estate broker. So that's kind of what I do in the daytime. That's my day job. But one of my hobbies is training speakers. So I'm head organizer for TEDx Timpview Drive, which is the TEDx chapter in Utah County. We do a lot of speaker training, keynotes, and things like that. So between the real estate and the speaker training, we try to stay busy, but it's a lot of fun. I grew up in a very combative household. When I say combative, I mean my parents had very different communication styles. Right. And I'm the oldest of four. And so I was in this situation where often when my parents were arguing, I had to referee these fights. And so my mom would say one thing and she would tell me, and then I would kind of walk over and then tell my dad, hey, mom said this, dad said this. And I was always baffled, even at a very young age, at how people can go through the exact same experience, but have a completely different interpretation. And so then when I started dating and when I got married, I really tried hard to learn those skills because I didn't want to repeat what had happened to my parents because their marriage ended up failing. And I feel that one of the reasons why it failed is because there was just this lack of ability to communicate. Like they could not hold a serious conversation without it turning into a fight. And so just my whole life has kind of been guided by that. Good communicators, bad communicators, and I've really seen both sides of that, and it's just completely consumed my life.
Something that I've heard and have always remembered is a lack of communication starts wars. An abundance of communication ends wars. And that's been so true for any disagreement I've got in with anybody or just, even seen my parents argue, it's the lack of communication that causes that. So did you make your first 10 grand a month from like helping people how to communicate, or how did you make that first 10K a month?
Yeah. So I started as a real estate agent back in 2012 and I was 22 years old at the time, but I looked like I was 16. I had no facial hair, skinny kid. I was always a very scrawny kid. And so I had to learn communication skills because I didn't have the expertise. I didn't have connections. I'd never run a business before. And so one of the things that I really focused on was my communication. And so I started making content for social media. And at the time, what I would do is just show my broker's clients properties. I would just go open the door. They would take a look at it. I would try to answer some questions. And so over time, I started to realize that if I wanted to get to 10K a month and beyond, I needed to find a way to generate my own leads. And the way I did that was by just polishing these videos that I would make on Facebook to just try to answer basic questions. And so once I kind of started getting the hang of that, it really helped me generate more leads, start to get a couple of clients on my own, and finally get to that six-figure mark that so many entrepreneurs are searching for.
Right. So it was in real estate that you made your first
Correct.
10K a month. And it was the communication that sounds like it made all the difference in the world.
It made all the difference because I had other colleagues and friends that were also agents, and they weren't that comfortable. So they really struggled to generate leads. And for me, it was a little bit easier once I got the hang of it because I started to get comfortable in front of a camera, in front of a mic, in front of people, because I was showing my broker's clients' properties. So I had that exposure and I was able to talk to people in person, navigate them through the real estate process. But that was a big turning point when I felt that I became a better communicator, that's when the income started to go up.
Communication is essentially key with business, with a relationship, with anything, because your branding can be right. You can have leads coming in. You can, like everything, all the stars can align. But if you are not good at communicating, if people don't like the way you talk, you're not looking them in the eye, you probably aren't going to generate a lot of money. What's the difference between someone who's a good communicator and a bad communicator?
So I think it comes to when you're face to face with someone. Because as you say, you can have great copy, you can make good videos, you can have a good social media marketing strategy. But if when you're with someone, you're not able to convey ideas, or you're awkward, or you don't seem confident, or they don't really trust you, we know that in order to sell people, people have to know, like, and trust you. And so often I think that we focus so much on the marketing side, on the funnels and the headlines and the hooks and all of that, which is one part of it. But then what happens when you're face to face? So that's one of the things that I truly focus on. I think that the people that are good communicators can connect with people where they are at. They're good at explaining things. They don't try to talk down to people. They understand that there are different communication styles. Some people are going to be more technical. Some people are going to be a little bit more emotional. So they have the ability to kind of tailor their approach based on the client or the customer. And I think that that makes all the difference.
You said confidence in there, and that's something that really stuck out to me. So when we learn to communicate, a lot of people aren't very confident at first, especially in front of a camera or on stage, or like talking to their clients for the first time, or even the 10th time. How does someone build up that confidence in their communication skills?
Yeah, so Alex Hormozy has one of the best quotes about confidence that I've ever heard. And he says that true confidence doesn't come from affirmations or vision boards, but rather true confidence comes from undeniable proof that you are who you say you are. So when you're talking to clients and customers, number one, you have to be sold on what you're selling. You have to understand it in depth. So when I talk to real estate agents, I always encourage them to put in the work to understand the contracts. You have to become an expert in your field. And as you do that, then you'll have more confidence to be able to answer questions. One of the things that scared me at first was I was terrified that a client would ask me a question that I wasn't able to answer. And so often I was kind of hesitant, and I would try to keep the conversation very basic, surface level, because I didn't want to get that question to where I would have to say that I don't know. So I think that the thing with building confidence is you have to stack up that evidence. Whatever you sell, whatever you do, understand your product, really believe in it. People can feel that when you're having a conversation with them, and just be genuine and honest. I mean, there are occasions where we'll go to a property and it's not a good buy. It's not a good deal. And you communicate that, versus when it is a good buy or it is a great deal, you can communicate both sides, and the client and the customer feels that you have their best interest in mind. So I found that to be a big differentiator, where you can understand your role, and I'm speaking as a real estate agent, to help you get a good deal and get into your property, versus I need you to buy something so that I can make money. I think the feeling between that is very, very tangible.
A lot of people, when they start a business, they don't totally understand exactly all the ins and outs of that business and how to do it. So my first business was window washing. When I was first going out to clients, I was like, I'll clean your windows. I didn't know exactly what all that was going to entail. I didn't know what I would need to do if I came across hard water or if I came across cement on the windows. And so the only way that I was able to increase my confidence in the communication and the knowledge there was doing it. It's reps. And that's with everything. And that's the part that I think people don't like as much, is it does take a lot of reps to become confident and knowledgeable in your industry. But you also said part of it is like liking what you do and enjoying what you do, because then you're going to get more obsessed with it, and you're going to get more into the details, and you're going to be thinking about, oh, how can I make this better? How can I make that better? Some people listening don't have a business yet. So really quick, they're trying to decide what to do. How does someone decide this is what I want to do versus this is what I feel like I should do?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I had to answer this question early on. I think there are two things that we have to look at. Number one, what are you good at? What are your natural talents? And number two is, what do you love to do? If those two things match, you won the lottery. But often, and this was the case for me, I got good at showing properties. I got good at explaining contracts in real estate. Was it my passion? No. But if you can identify a strength that you have, often you can lean into that at first, because you're going to be good. You're going to be better than most because you have that confidence. Even if you don't necessarily love it at the beginning, what that was able to open up for me was later, then I was able to do something that I enjoy much more, which is coaching speakers and putting on events. But I think that at first, it's either something that you're great at or something that you love. And if those two match, then I think that that is the absolute winning formula. So for new entrepreneurs, it's always asking yourself those two questions. I would say having a combination of those two things, your skills and your passions, I think is the beginning of the roadmap to get there.
And I like that right there is it's the beginning because I can't think of too many entrepreneurs that first got into something, started their business, and that's still only what they do, 10 years down the road. A lot of times it evolves into something different, or maybe it's that plus this. And so it's good to do something that you're good at, something that you like. But I think also it's just get started. Because if you're not going to find out really quick if you don't actually like that, or if you're going to realize that you like that even more than you even ever thought you would. So a lot of people are talking to clients for the first time, and maybe they're going out knocking on doors, and they knock on a door and they get someone's phone number to reach back out. Do they reach back out immediately? Do they wait a day? Do they how does someone manage a new lead and the communication between that up till when they actually exchange value?
Yeah, I think it depends on the individual. And here I feel that sometimes we make a mistake of always going to these objection busters, if you will. Mm-hmm. Some people want you to reach out right away. There are statistics that say if you don't reach out to a lead within a certain number of minutes or hours, then the probability of them converting is way lower. So I do think that you want to do it as soon as possible. That said, though, not everybody responds to that. Some people are more comfortable with, hey, let me think this over for a couple of days. They genuinely mean that. So early on in my career, when I got that objection, I would try to bust it right away with some pre-practice script. But I realized that, human beings, we're all different. And with some, there might be an objection that you can speak to in the moment, but for others, they might need to talk to their spouse. They might need a day or two, especially in my industry where we talk about real estate. And for me, it got crazy because back during COVID, the market was crazy. So we had to send offers immediately. Like there was no time to debate or go look at a couple more properties or go do another walkthrough. So I had to really try to rush people to do things because the market was so hot. And so it was in that kind of firestorm that I learned that was great for some folks, but for other people it was a complete turnoff. And they were not comfortable with the speed and the push. So I think that you have to be mindful of your customer and of your client. And often if it's in person, you can feel it. If it's over the phone, people will give you verbal cues, but you have to find a way to where you can provide value without making it feel awkward. And that was something that I struggled with early on.
So when you get that number and you got that lead and you can reach back out, it sounds like you really got to listen to the client. Whatever they say, do that. Because if they say don't reach out for a few days or let me think about it for a few days, talk to my spouse, they mean that. Do not reach out before that because it's almost like rude and going against their wishes on what they want and how they want to be communicated with. And the biggest part is communication's not just speaking, it's listening. And I think that's a big problem that, I have and then other people have is that listening part. How can someone get better at listening? Because there's listening, but then there's active listening.
Yeah. So I think active listening is being mindful of some of the things that the client or the customer is naturally thinking. Mm-hmm. So in my case, when I map out the process or I think about when I was a first-time home buyer, what were some of my questions? What were some of my doubts? My wife, when we were picking a property, really try as hard as you can to put yourself in the person's shoes. And I think that creates empathy. And I think that when you have empathy, it allows you to listen because now it's, I'm trying to help you versus I'm trying to make money. And that's a big distinction because without a doubt, we're in business and we're in business to sell and make money. Yeah. But the more that we can be empathetic, understand people's needs, and in order to do that, you have to listen, ask the proper questions, and then be quiet. As soon as you can identify what their true needs are, then the sale becomes so much easier. But you have to allow that time of silence and listening so that you can learn yourself, and then you'll be in a position to help someone instead of having this one-size-fits-all approach that is not going to fit everybody. And maybe it would have been someone that you could have helped perfectly if you would have just listened to them, but you try to barge through the door and get them to sell with one of these objection busters and was a complete turnoff and they left and they bought from someone else.
When I've met salespeople for the first time, they are sometimes way over the top. They'll come shake my hand, put their arm around me. Hey, sit down. Let me get you this. Let me get you that. What can I do to earn your business? It's overwhelming sometimes. And I think that has turned me off to whatever the person was selling. A lot of times it was car dealerships, actually.
Car dealerships.
Yeah.
And you can tell it's not genuine.
Yeah, exactly.
At least I can feel that way. And the car dealership example is perfect. You go in there and you just know they're going to pounce you and they're not going to let you leave. And every time that I bought a car, they have not let me leave the dealership. I've been there for like 6 hours and they just, if I try to leave, like, no, don't leave. And it can get awkward. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. So how does someone avoid that? Because we want to make money. If we're not making money, if money's not coming in, we don't really have a business. If we're not serving customers, we don't have a business. It's just more of a hobby at that point. So we have to make the sales, we have to make money, but we also have to focus on helping people and not coming over the top. How do we find that balance? Because we have to treat each client a little different because people are different.
Of course. I think it depends. Number one, when you make a distinction between cold outreach and warm outreach, that is a big difference. When I say cold outreach, is it somebody that did not solicit you, you're door knocking, you're just cold calling. That approach has to be a little bit different. I think that in that case, you have to get really good at just explaining what you do in simple terms to see if the person is even interested. But when you talk about warm, for example, these car dealerships, when I walk into the car dealership, it's obvious I have something on my mind. It's similar to when somebody books an appointment or a buyer consultation, you know that they have a purchase on their mind. And so once you're in that scenario, I think it goes back to what you said before, which is active listening and being able to build rapport, show them that you are an expert in this field. You can absolutely help them, but you'd like to learn a little bit about them to see if it's a good fit. And I think that when you say that to people, it kind of brings the walls down. When you can just simply genuinely say, I'd love to learn a little bit about you, learn kind of what your goals are and what you're looking for to see how I can help. Now it's different. Now it's not sign here because I don't want to waste my time. Now it's a little bit more personal. And what I found is that people tend to open up. And this can happen with solar, this can happen with pest control, this can happen with insurance, whatever it is that you sell, the person has a certain need where they just saw spiders in their daughter's room, so they called a pest control company. It's just having a little bit of empathy and understanding where the client comes from, whether it's cold or warm, and really working on that approach and auditing it. I think that one of the things that we struggle with is that self-observation and not being so hard on yourself that when you get a no, you beat yourself up. But yes, audit it and say, okay, what could I have done differently? How would have I felt with this approach? What was their response? And as you do that, you'll learn and you'll improve. But again, as we said before, it's not a one size fits all.
Right. So it's asking the right questions is what it sounds like. Asking the question and then shut up and listen. One of my favorite little stories is, do you know who Bradley is?
Yes, of
course. The real Bradley dropping bombs.
Bradley dropping bombs.
He tells the story is like when like this guy and his daughter came in looking to buy a car. And he's like, hey, this is a nice sports car. How much is it? Asking the questions. And he's answering the question. He's like, okay, well, tell me a little bit more about it. And he's like, oh, well, it goes really fast. It 0 to 60 in this much time. It's going to turn all the heads. And he's like, well, I'm actually buying this for my daughter, not me. And it sounds like it's not going to be safe. And so he ended up not buying it and leaving the dealership, where it's asking the right questions, finding out their goals, like you were saying, is who are they actually buying it for? Was it the daughter or was it for him? Did you just bring her along for the ride?
Perfect
so
example.
It's asking the right questions.
I think once you identify the need by asking the proper questions, and again, I'm always going to go back to a real estate lens, but once I can figure out why they want to buy either the first home, why they want to upgrade, what areas do they like, what's kind of their budget, what are some of maybe the basic questions that they have. Once I get all of that info, then I start answering. Then I start educating, or then I start providing the value that I have. But often we have the order of the information in reverse. So we want to really sell ourselves first, and then maybe at the end we'll give them a chance to talk a little bit. When you reverse it, it's completely different. So in a scenario like that, once you have the info, once you identify the need, then you go into the explanation or the service or the product. And basically the question that you're trying to answer is, based on what you just said, here's what I have, and here's how it can help you solve this need that you just shared with me. But again, it's not getting it in the reverse order, which often we're so obsessed with building rapport up front, and we're worried that they're not going to trust us, they're not going to like us, that we don't give them any oxygen to just tell us why you're here in the first place.
I feel like that comes back to that confidence, have the mindset of they want what you have, you just got to listen and figure out what they need, what they want. and then give it to them. But you can't give someone something if you don't even know that's what they want. So you got to do that in the right order.
Absolutely.
Are there common mistakes that people make when communicating with clients and, potential clients that kind of turn the client off and, that end up compromising the sale?
Yeah, no doubt. Often I think it's a combination of verbal and nonverbals. The nonverbals are actually huge because what you can portray with some of these nonverbals, I give a visual vocal image workshop and we talk about this. But 3 things when you're talking to someone that I think that we need to avoid is, number 1, on the vocal side, is resist the temptation to cut people off. Even if you do it nicely, like often we'll be talking to someone and you know what they're going to say next. So have you ever been in a situation where someone finishes your sentences for you?
All the time.
It's so annoying.
It is so annoying.
And often they're not doing it in a malicious way. They're just either trying to get the conversation along, or maybe they're trying to show that they relate to you so they know what you're going to say. So number 1, don't cut people off. Resist that temptation to finish people's sentences. Number 2, one of the nonverbals is actually pay attention. Don't have your phone in your hand. Don't look at your phone. This is something that I had to work on a lot early on because in real estate, you need access to information. What's the square footage? What's the property tax? So what I started doing was I always had my phone in my hand. And when we were touring properties, I would often glance down at my phone. I wasn't on social media. I actually had the property information, but it felt like I was doing something different. It felt like I was distracted. So what I started doing instead was printing out the actual property info so that I wouldn't walk around with my phone. So when you're with clients, put the technology away. Even having it in your hand, if I was here doing this podcast like this, even if I never look at it, it feels different. It feels like I'm waiting for a text message. It feels like at any moment, I'm just going to glance at it. And so sometimes we carry it in our hands and it's distracting. Even now, the people that are watching, all you're focusing on is my phone. This hand. It doesn't feel like I'm really paying attention. So put the phone away and actually pay attention to the individual. And the last one would be, and this one's actually really funny. It happens to me often. When you're talking to somebody, look at them in the eyes. Don't look at their face. Don't look at their eyebrows. Don't look at their nose. Don't look at their facial hair or their ears or their hair. Look at their eyes. And often, if we can get some of these nonverbals down, it completely changes the way people connect with us. But if we get these wrong, if we're slouched, if we have a lot of filler words, or if we're just doing other things with phones, or we're looking at their ears when they're trying to explain something, then you lose people. And it doesn't matter if you have a great skill set or if your product is tremendous and it could really benefit them, it's not going to connect and you're probably going to lose that sale.
Okay, so number 1, don't cut people off. Put your phone away and look people in the eyes.
Don't look at their face.
Because if you're looking at their mouth while they're talking,
it's so awkward.
It's awkward. It almost looks like you want to kiss them.
It does. It's the worst.
Don't do it.
People do this all the time. So it's just being mindful of those things. Look people in the eye. They'll appreciate that. Don't look at their hair. It makes people feel, what's the correct word? It makes them feel insecure. Maybe you've got a zit over here. You've got something and you're just staring at it. It's one of the most awkward situations. And one of the things that we as human beings, all of us, want to avoid is awkward situations. So if you create awkward situations through your communication, nobody's going to want to talk to you.
Do you look at like the left eye, the right eye, the dead center, like on the nose?
So usually right here.
You look right in the middle of the bridge?
Right in the middle.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
What about hands? I think a lot of people don't know what to do with their hands. Do they move? Should they move them when they talk? Should they put them in their pockets? Should they, like fold them or, put them together? What do people do with their hands?
Hand gestures are so fascinating. Often when you are trying to sell or when you're trying to build rapport, you want to show your palms, right? Because palms, it shows that you're open, that you're honest, that you have nothing to hide. Versus if you're like this, it just feels different. It's great to use your hands. I mean, if I was just like this the whole time, it gets a little bit monotone and boring.
Yeah.
So definitely using your hands. But when you're trying to sell and build rapport and build trust, palms open, these kinds of gestures, or if you have a question, would you like to say something? Use the open palms as one of the biggest keys for salespeople. Because again, you want to build trust, you want to build confidence, you want to build rapport. So it's open hands is one of the best ways to do that.
Yeah, and it's not just having like open hands that they're open, not fists necessarily, but it's turning them up. Because when your palms are up, your hands are up, you're able to receive it's communicating that you receive, but also giving.
Yeah.
You know, because if your palms are down, you can still give people things like that, but you're more handing, like dropping it off at them and
And
giving
it feels
to them.
totally different. If I say, do you have a question versus, do you have a question?
Right.
You see
Exactly.
that?
The difference is you're pointing, because for the people listening and not watching, he's pointing
Pointing
versus palm down.
Versus open, palm up, feels different. Try it.
Completely different. And I think at Disneyland, they actually train all of their employees that when they point and say, hey, this is where this ride is, it's actually all fingers forward, palm up, and point out with the entire hand, not just
one finger.
With a finger.
There's a reason for that.
It's on purpose. So what about when you're listening? And because that's, we just talked about hands, what to do while you're talking. What about when you're listening?
So when you're listening, there's a very common technique that's called mirroring. It doesn't always work. You have to be mindful and kind of practice it a little bit. But what mirroring is when somebody says something, you simply repeat it back almost verbatim. So if I ask you, how many bedrooms are in your home?
3.
You've got 3 bedrooms in your home. That's mirroring. Or when someone says, how important is the yard to you?
Really important.
It's really important.
Yeah.
That's all it is. So often mirroring makes the other individual feel like you're actually listening. And so I've incorporated mirroring a lot because number one, it allows me to remember things better. When they say 3 bedrooms, I repeat it back at a subconscious level. Now I said it, it's easier to remember. So I mirror a lot when I'm having conversations and it keeps you engaged because if I know that I'm going to mirror the next thing that you say to build the next point, I have to listen. If I'm not paying attention or if I'm just thinking about the next thing that I want to say, I'm not going to be able to do that. So study mirroring. It's one of the best techniques for active listening that I've found.
Yeah, no, mirroring, it does a lot of things. Everything you just said, but like another thing that I'll add to it is you're proving to your client, the person you're talking to, that you heard what they said. You're proving it by telling them back what they just said. And it makes them feel very heard, listened, instead of just talking like they're talking to a wall.
Just go into the next thing.
Yeah, you're proving to them that you are actually listening and that you care. That's what it's really saying is I care about what you just said.
That's what we're trying to do. That's the whole objective.
Yep, that's how we build rapport. I like where this is going with body language because there's 3 kinds of communication. There's or 3, I guess, components to it. There's the verbal, like the words we actually say, and words can have different meanings, but a lot of times it's based off which is the second one, the tone. So it's words, tone, and then body language. Those are all the 3. Am I missing anything?
No, those are the 3 big ones. So if someone wants to improve communication, those are
focus on those 3 because it's not just about the words you say, and people will know this. It's probably just growing up, how your parents said one thing versus the other. It's like, hey, will you go get the dishes? Hey, will you go get the dishes?
And it happens so much in relationships.
Yeah.
It's not what they said. They just said it in a way that triggered you for some reason. And often people get in disagreements, not over what was said, but how it was said. So you definitely have to be mindful of that for sure.
And so got to focus on all 3 of those. The words you use, and you'll get better at that the more you talk. And I recommend everyone start a podcast just for that reason. Get better at talking, get the reps in. And then when you edit it yourself too, you can hear yourself and go over. It's like just reviewing how well you are and see what you can change on. But it's getting better at the words you use, how you say them. And a lot of times I think the best way to see that, because I've talked to people that sound really angry, but then you say, hey, calm down, or you're sounding angry. They're like, I'm not angry. It's like, so a lot of times we don't even realize the tone that we're using with people. And then the body language. I'm pretty sure it's like 80-something% of all communication is body language, because you can communicate most of what you're feeling or what you want someone to do without words.
Without words.
Yeah. Like if I wanted you to leave right now, I could just, with my body language, I could communicate, get out, right? And so it's all 3 of those, and they're all very important. But when someone's communicating over the phone or even text, there's no body language. There's no facial expressions. Let's go with a phone call. We're calling a client. How do we help with that communication as far as the words and the tone, the verbal side of it?
Yep. So one of the things that really helped me was in doing these calls, you said it before, getting the reps, but trying to smile when you're on the phone, that makes a tremendous difference.
I was hoping you'd say that.
People can feel that. People, if you're bored, if you're just not paying attention and you're just going through this phone call, people can feel it. So all of them kind of correlate where it's still active listening. It's still mirroring. It's still what does your face look like as you're on the phone call. if you have this bored face and you're just on this phone call and there's not a lot of movement in your face, versus if you're active and you're animated. When I would make these cold calls, I would stand up. I tried not to sit. I tried to be active with my hands. Even though I was on the phone and they couldn't see me, I found it to be so different. Same thing with podcasting. When I first started podcasting, I would just sit here in front of the mic, not a lot of movement. If you guys are listening, I'm just sitting here, arms folded. But when I started moving my hands and being a little bit more animated, it changes the way that the words come out of your mouth. And so that's one of the biggest things when it comes to listening over the phone. When it comes to text messages, I've actually tried to shy away from text messaging, even though it's a very convenient way to communicate. So I'm a big voice notes person, and that might annoy some people, but when it's with clients, I'm big on voice notes because it's different when you just send a text message. Like you said, there's no tone. They don't know if it's a serious thing, if it's a happy thing. They just read the text message. So I try to steer away from that based on experiences.
Yeah. And I've heard Chris Voss say it's like by default, whether it's an email, a text message, you can almost just count on it being taken in a negative way. Key and Peele make a great video where they're making fun of that exact very thing where it's like, oh, do you want to come over to dinner tonight? And, the guy sends it and he's like, do I want to come over to dinner tonight or something? But it's a beautiful thing. I don't know what it's called. Maybe I'll put it in the show notes for anyone that want to watch it because it very well shows like how things can be taken the wrong way over a text. So I think people, unless you're very careful with how you say your words, you can almost count on it be taken in a negative way. So the voice notes, which I love using those too. And going back to the smiling thing, people can hear a smile. Absolutely. It's so weird, but people can hear it. And so I think that's one very basic thing that everyone can do when you're on the phone with a client or with a business partner is try and smile when you're on the phone. And when you're moving around, because a lot of times when I'm on the phone, I'm like walking around. Very, very rarely am I just sitting there like on the phone.
Physical movement.
Yeah, move around because it all channels through your voice, the smile, your body language, all of that. It all comes through your voice. So what are 3 things that people could do to start building better communication habits?
So there's one exercise that I will recommend that is probably the most impactful exercise that I've done as far as communications. I put all of my speakers through this because it helps identify your tendencies and your weak spots. So what you're going to do is you're going to think of something that you can talk about for 5 minutes. It can be anything. It can be your favorite vacation. It can be talk about your kids, talk about your hobby, talk about your favorite sports team, whatever it is, doesn't matter. 5 minutes on the cuff, improvised, but you're going to record it. So you're going to set down your phone. You're going to talk about something for 5 minutes. Then you're going to do a 3-part review. First, you're going to watch it with the volume all the way down. That's going to allow you to look at your body language. What are my hands doing? Is it awkward? Am I touching my face? What's happening here? Is it a little bit weird? You'll start to pick up on some of the things that you naturally do that could be distracting. Then you're going to have volume all the way up. You're going to place it face down on the table and you're just going to listen to it. And you're going to start listening for all of what we call vocal foundations in our workshops. Your tone, your pitch. Is it too loud? Is it monotone? Are there pauses? Is there a lot of filler words? Are you like, right, but? You know what I'm saying? If you have a lot of those, you'll be able to pick up on those and be able to start eliminating them. And the third thing you're going to do is you're going to jump on Fiverr and you're going to pay $5 to have somebody transcribe your video. Don't pay more than $5. If you pay more than $5, you're getting scammed. $5, and you're going to have them transcribe it verbatim. And then you're going to read it. When you do that 3-part review, you learn so much about yourself because it's so different watching yourself with no volume, listening to yourself with no visual, and then reading with no visual and no audio. What you'll learn will be tremendous. So have an objective review of that, whether it's just yourself or with somebody that you trust, and start to pick up on the things that you'd like to change. For most people, it's going to be filler words. Their hands are going to be a little bit weird. But what a lot of people say is, I didn't realize how monotone I was, or I didn't realize how fast I talk. So that's an exercise that I recommend for everybody to gain a little bit of self-awareness as to how you communicate and start the process of improving that.
It sounds like you get a lot out of just that one little thing. Because it's 5 minutes and then review. So this is in total maybe like a 30-minute like thing. Max. And so, some people are gonna be like, oh, that's a lot of time, but you're gonna be so glad in 3 months, 6 months, a year down the road that you did this.
Because the only other way to do it is to go out and talk to people, to do the cold call, to go with a client. But you might still feel a little bit insecure in doing that. So I have found that if you can practice in private, then you'll be much more effective in public. So some people will say, oh, I don't want to do an exercise like that, or it's too awkward. I hate watching myself. Well, if you hate watching yourself because you feel you're too awkward, guess what everybody else thinks? Same thing. The same things that you pick up on that you think are weird, you're doing that in front of others. So it's definitely worth it to put in the time to learn what those are, clean it up, and then continue to do it again. Then do another 5-minute video. Maybe try to limit the filler words. Maybe don't have your hands being so loud. Maybe have it a little bit more contained. Maybe try pausing here and there. And over time, as you do this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, the 5th time will be completely different than the first time. And you can have a pretty big transformation in a very short period of time.
Right. And it's free. It doesn't cost anything. You don't have to worry about judgment from other people. That's a very simple, easy thing. I like that a lot. So what about let's say someone's done that every day for a month and they've done about as much as they can do. I'm sure it takes longer than a month. I don't know how long it takes. How long do they have to do that for?
So I have speakers do it as many times as it takes. So we'll identify what those things are. If it's filler words, you're going to do it until you get to a point where you feel comfortable that there aren't that many filler words, until it stops feeling awkward. So it can be 5 times, it can be 500 times, depending on how you want to do it. It's just reps, like you said.
Yeah. So is there a point where you want to start having other people give you feedback on those videos?
Yes.
Do you ever do that?
I do. I think at first, the first couple, do them yourself. Then try to bring somebody that you trust. So it can be a spouse, partner, best friend, somebody that you know has your best interest at heart, and they'll review it and then they'll give you their feedback. The ultimate test is when you go out and talk to clients. Yeah. And you go out and you do the phone call. So that's kind of the final boss. But absolutely, I think it's very helpful to have people that are not trying to bring you down. Like, it has to be somebody that has a good intention. And then they'll listen to it and they'll give you the feedback. But what I would say is that part often causes a lot of people insecurity because we're not good at receiving feedback.
Yep.
It's this immediate response to want to defend yourself or want to explain it away. So if you get this feedback of, well, your hands are a little bit loud, you'll explain it. Oh, well, the reason why I do that is because I'm really excited about the subject matter. You'll explain it away. So in order for this to be effective, just receive the feedback and resist the urge to immediately respond and just let it marinate for a little bit and then watch it on your own time and say, do they have a point? They obviously feel that way. So for you, it might not seem very loud because that's how you are, but to them it does. So you have to take into consideration that a client, a customer, a coworker, a colleague might feel the same way.
I think that's where a lot of people are going to maybe struggle with, is actually being willing to give that to someone else and say, tell me everything that I could improve on. You know, because a lot of us like to think we're the badass, we're the person that can do anything, but that's not always the case. At least not now, you know, because a lot of times for people that are just starting businesses is like the season of learning, not necessarily earning. We got to learn a lot of skills before we can start hitting that 10K a month, the 20K, you know, eventually. I know I want people to be able to take this and apply it all and make millions of dollars.
Sure.
And, you know, eventually get on stage, maybe on a TED Talk.
Get on stage.
And that's something you run. You run TED Talk in Utah or?
In Utah County.
Utah County.
Yep. So the way that TEDx is set up is there are different chapters. So Utah has multiple chapters that have been around for a long time. The biggest ones are TEDx Salt Lake. They do a phenomenal job. And then they have TEDx St. George. There are a couple of other ones there have been one-offs, TEDx BYU, UVU. Now there's TEDx Midvale. So I run TEDx Timpview Drive, which is the only established chapter in Utah County, which is the county where I live. And it's a lot of fun. It's completely different. Kind of going back to the point that you were talking about before. With speakers, that's very difficult, especially with speakers that have experience, because if they've done these keynote speeches for a long time telling their story or whatever it is, now they get to TED and now they don't have 45 minutes. Now they have 15, 16 minutes, and you have to trim a lot of that fat. And there's a lot of resistance there because, again, they've been doing it a certain way for a long time. Now we have to change everything. And so being coachable, being vulnerable, being willing to accept feedback is one of the biggest challenges when it comes to training these speakers.
So at what point can someone do a TED Talk?
So you can apply at any point in time. There's no specific bar. It's not like, hey, you have to have 50 keynote speeches. It's, do you have the ability to relate to the theme? Do you have a story to tell? Do you have a message to convey? TED is all about ideas worth spreading. So as we're going through this process, it's finding what is your one idea. And that's often difficult to do because when you tell your story, if you tell me the story of your life, there's a lot of ideas in there. There's a lot of conflicts or there's a lot of concepts, things that you could talk about. So it's trying to isolate the one idea. So if you have the ability to do that, usually most TEDx organizers want to see a little bit of experience. So they'll ask for footage of if you're on a podcast or if you've done a presentation before. But the direct answer to your question is there is no hard requirement. Anybody can apply to any of the TEDx events.
You probably don't want to do it for your first talk.
You probably don't want to do it for the first time.
Do those get posted on the TEDx YouTube?
So not all of them do.
Okay.
Which is
so
interesting.
They select which ones to go on.
Exactly. So TEDx has a very specific structure that they want you to follow. There's something called a TEDx Masterclass that you guys can Google, take that. There's a book called Talk Like TED. There's a structure there. And so TED wants you to follow the structure as closely as possible. If they feel that you don't, then they won't publish you. But yeah, the goal is not only to get on a TEDx stage, but to make the TEDx YouTube channel that has millions and millions of subscribers. So that's really kind of the springboard for a lot of speakers, because if they can get their talk posted and all of a sudden it has 250,000 views, that changes everything for a speaker.
So that's something I would challenge anybody listening to this is work on your communication skills and your presenting skills all the way to the point where you can contact Tony and get on TED. And so you teach classes for realtors and loan officers on how to make $10K a month. So if someone wants to talk with you, learn how they can do that, how do they go about that?
Absolutely. So you can find me on Instagram. I'm at tonyacosta.us. I post a lot of clips and we hold classes. We just finished up a 6-week digital marketing course for agents and loan officers where we teach you how to create lead magnets, how to create a compelling offer, how to post on social media, how to do reels, how to start a podcast that can be aimed at growing your business. So it's a very similar objective that you have, just to trying to get agents and loan officers to that coveted 5-figure a month place. Yeah. And I've loved the process of doing that.
So should they reach out to you personally on Instagram or
Absolutely.
go to your website?
No, they can just reach out to me personally. I do have a website, tonyacosta.net. But the easiest way is just through any of these social media platforms. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram. Instagram is probably the easiest one. So yeah, I'm always open to giving feedback and trying to provide some value.
Love it. So just message Tony like you're messaging a friend on Instagram. Love it. Well, Tony, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
My guest today was Tony Acosta. If you want to learn more about him or get in contact with him, follow him on social media at Tony Acosta, where you can find links to his coaching and get more information on real estate, TEDx, and much more. Links are in the show notes. Well, that wraps up another episode of Utah Hustlers. If you got value from this episode, it would mean the world to me if you would leave a rating and review. If you already have, thank you so much. Consider sharing this with a friend or family member that could use this information to build their business. Remember, it's not just about knowing what to do, it's about taking the required action. Until next time, keep building.